Yeah.
All right, we are live at the Red Room again. We are on episode 60. Kind of a little shocked about that. We just started this kind of a fun little thing to give back to the real estate community. Obviously, I'm the president of Phoenix RIA, so it plays there, and it's kind of like, you know, what's going on in the real estate market. And we've talked a lot about creative finance stuff. Subject to novations, kind of like having those in your toolbox versus just the wholesale deal, which obviously the wholesale deal is easy for everybody to understand because I think about everybody sells that course, right? But
yeah, probably.
But the subject to and the novation are a little bit more difficult. And with the subject to, I wanted to ask this question, so I'll ask it in a minute. I think there's actually some penalties that could happen if you don't do it the right way for QM law purposes. And I'm going to ask that question in a second because I'm a loan officer as well. And actually, I reached out to a friend of Rochelle's saying, hey, will you underwrite these borrowers for me? And I'm like, and he's like, well, you're a loan officer, do it yourself. And I'm like, honestly, I want nothing to do with underwriting my buyer, right? I want zero part of that. So just a little market update. I don't know if anybody's paid attention. I posted something like, hey, you know, we're cruising along, but the rates are up. And I posted that. And I had a couple of people like, no, inventory is too low. Well, I got news for you guys. If demand goes below inventory, then inventory starts rising. And we've seen about 1,000 houses come on the Phoenix market in the last, 30 to 40 days. If you go watch a couple episodes, we talked about being about 11,000 actives for all of Maricopa County and 12,000 actives just weeks later. So anyway, that's a little catch up, and now we'll jump into the content. Rochelle, tell us how you got started, where you got started, and what we need to know.
Perfect. Well, I'm excited to be with you guys. Thanks for the invitation. And I actually waited to tell Chris this because I don't think he remembers, but I started back at Keller Williams, and I was one of the listing agents that went on appointments with his son trying to get listings. So so that's a long time ago. So I've been in this for about 17 years, and I started on the retail side. I'm from Arizona. I currently live in Southern California. So I started doing that. I had a boss at that time at Keller Williams that was having us do these calls in regards to just asking if they wanted a cash price. I started to listen to what he was saying. I was thinking, man, how easy is that to not have the spuds, to not have the Benzers, and to just be able to buy a home at a reduced price and be able to close it out quickly, right? The beauty of wholesaling. So that's what kind of introduced me into the investment world of having those calls as a realtor. And then, as you guys know, I mean, I could double or triple my income. So that was very advantageous to me. And at that time, I was a single mom. So all of the different things in my environment was like, I got to do this. So once I got into that, I'm sure you guys can resonate with this, just being around the right people that can expose you to things to increase your knowledge. And luckily, I've been very, very blessed to work with some amazing people, some amazing escrow agents. Like I was telling Chris and Luke, I'm the salesperson. So I was the person on the acquisition side that loved to get the deals, go direct to seller. And so once I learned how to do that, I started just to increase my knowledge. And I realized I was giving so much value to my clients because not everybody is retail ready, right? It doesn't fit that scenario all the time. So now I had a skill set where I could say, okay, you don't have enough equity in your home. So let's talk about maybe a creative option, or maybe it was an investor wanting to offload some properties that needed rehab. Let's talk about a wholesale option. So basically, that's what I've been doing over the last probably about 13 years is I've really dove deep in the creative side and the wholesale. As I was just telling you guys, the escrow process is the messiest process. As you know, when you want to scale your business, you cannot be in all of the different elements of your business.
Definitely not.
You just can't, and I had to learn that the hard way because I was a little bit of a control freak, if I'm being completely transparent. Like, I can do this and I can do this. And I got really good at the paperwork, but I realized in order to scale my business, I had to offload that. But I couldn't find a title companies, I'm sure you guys can understand that actually knew how to do it. So once I
Right.
system, that's where constant close came into play. So basically, that's just kind of a synopsis of where I've been. So my intention these days is to really serve people and helping them learn how to do the paperwork the right way, because as long as you can have rapport, you can really understand the seller's scenario and give them a solution. The longevity of the game of staying in this business is knowing how to do the paperwork the right way when you are in the realm of creative finance. It's so very important. So once I was able to really lock down and make systems and processes, I saw the value there. So at this current time, we're able to serve everybody in all 50 states. And it's been great. So I have an amazing team that I couldn't do any of this without, but that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm also an investor. I have my own portfolio. I'm investing myself. You have to practice what you preach, right? And in order for you to really give value to people. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. And I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I have 5 kids. So my life, I should have a reality TV show. Like my life is
busy for sure.
But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So let's talk about the paperwork aspect. Like, so we got the A to B transaction where you're getting the deal from the seller. Obviously, you know, I've heard that I've seen other people talk about like how the seller can have amnesia, meaning, you know, they sign up for this deal where they're leaving their loan in place subject to, but then, you know, they reach back out 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road. And it sounds like you've been in the business long enough, so you had to have seen a couple of those. What suggestions do you have there? I think on my contract, I think they have to initial that like 3 different places, 3 different times.
Right. So the contracts are imperative to really handling that transparency. Transparency means protection. Protection means longevity in the business, right? So it's being very transparent to not just lock down a contract. It's to say, do you understand that your name will stay in place on the loan and that the deed is transferring? Do you understand that you cannot communicate with not that they can't, but to your point, Chris, one of the biggest risks is the seller's risk, because it is not the nature of their world to remember. I've sold a house to Rochelle 6 months ago or 2 years ago. So what you're talking about is exactly what I'm saying. You have to have what I call post-close documentation that will allow you to change that communication with their permission, that the bank will call me. I will represent myself as a property manager. I can add myself to the insurance and I can handle that. So that contract and your documentation is key to be able to have that. And you're exactly right. I've seen it. I personally haven't had that happen just because I really, obviously it's my business. So I'm a documentation queen, you know, but I've had people come back recently. I'll share a scenario with you. He was making a payment. The bill pay stopped working and it's 7 months. And now he's going to foreclosure. He goes back to the seller because now the lender does not want to take any payments. And the seller's like, you screwed up my credit. And now, you know what I mean? There's a lot of if we would have gotten the documentation right and servicing and all this stuff, he probably would have set himself up for success. So I could go on for stories and stories, but Chris, you're exactly right. You need to have the right type of contract with transparency and the right documentation to be able to have longevity in the business in creative finance realm.
Well, and Rochelle, I'm sure a lot of times too, this is extremely foreign to people. So especially the ones that are going under contract on them, you know, this is not something that they've typically ever dealt with before. Where it's like when you're explaining that to them, hey, that, you know, we are going to leave this in your name. They probably still at some points don't necessarily understand what that means. They're like, you know, because I mean, you get people that get confused with, you know, with wholesale contracts. You get people that get confused with novation. I mean, especially novation contracts. So I mean, the same thing. You got to be extremely transparent with what you're actually talking about. Because I mean, I remember one of the first novation contracts we ever did. Yeah, they came back and we ended up having the end buyer that we were going to sell it to. They ended up backing out, and so they were extremely confused with the entire process. They're like, "Wait, what do you mean?" And it all comes down to obviously explaining that, but obviously we didn't do a great job at it on our very first couple novations. But yeah, it's kind of wild how important that is.
It really is. And it's about having the right partners in place. You don't need to know everything, but can you
Yep.
reach out and talk to someone that can say, let me bring this person in?
For sure.
You
For
guys
sure.
know that, you know what I mean? So collaboration is great.
So we talked
Absolutely.
about that. So let's talk about once you sell it from the B2C buyer. Now I'm a loan officer, so I know that based on QM laws that the buyers actually need to qualify. You can offer them financing, but if they don't actually qualify, you're not supposed to actually, because you're acting like the bank, right? So you got to kind of follow the same rules that the banks follow. So just because you give them, everybody, like I see a lot of people going, hey, we're doing great, we're giving home ownership, we're doing all these good things, but technically you can't give you, I mean, you can want to feel good inside all you want, but you have to do it the right way, right?
So true. So we talked about this, Chris. It's called an RMLO, a registered mortgage loan officer. They're specific for these types of, I would say, seller finance transactions. There's something called a hybrid deal where you mix a sub-2 and a seller finance. And I see a lot of people not putting like Dodd-Frank in their contract. So there's a lot of these different nuances that people are thinking, I have a wholesale contract, I'm going to sell it. I'm going to put it in the additional terms. But you're exactly right. You have to show the intention if you're acting as the bank. Can they make this payment, especially if your acquisition was a sub-2, right? You're taking that responsibility. Say, I know this underlining payment, I'm selling it. Does this end buyer or wrap buyer, or however you're dispositioning it, can they make that payment? And
Do they even qualify? Yeah.
do they even qualify, right? And what happens
Right.
if someone does get upset? You have the documentation to be like, listen, I did qualify them.
Yep.
I see that their scenario changed, but I did do my due diligence. And that's what I'm saying. Transparency, protection for the longevity in the game. It just can't preach that over and over again.
Right. Because they also want to make sure you're not going to throw a 23% interest rate on them as well.
Yes. And I'm sure Chris could speak to that even more as an expertise in that. But, I get that question all the time. What kind of interest rate can I give? In all these different things. But yeah, you have to, what do they call it, Chris? Not be a predatory lender, right?
For sure.
Well, it's called the high. So, as a loan officer, you got to go to class every year, your continuing education, just like, realtors do, but it's called high price mortgage. So technically you're only supposed to get, as long as you're within 2 points of the going rate. So when I've been selling my seller finance deals, I've been selling them at like 8.5.
Yeah.
Going rate being like 7.25. I don't even want to try to get to 9 because, like, I just know that high price mortgages are over 2% of the going rate. So if I'm at 8.5 and the going rate 7.25, I'm not taking advantage of anything. And that's why, everybody is like, oh, this has been around for years. But yeah, it's been around for years. But when it was 3% mortgages and you could put your house on the market and sell it in an hour. I mean, how many houses would you sell in an hour, Luke, right?
No, for sure.
So, but now it actually makes sense because you go get this house, and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, the most of the people I see come across that accept the situation, it seems like divorce is like number one.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree. Yeah. And I think what you said was so valuable too. It goes to I'm always thinking of the questions I get from investors, and I always feel like that brings value to these podcasts. And they say, well, why would someone want to pay that? That's probably a question someone's asking. Well, a lot of these people, just like Chris said, I actually had a scenario, like I said, I talk to people all day where they have the stable income. One was a lawyer, one was a doctor, but their credit went to crap because they were going through a divorce. Divorces, unfortunately, are messy in general, but they had that stable income. So when they went through the RMLO, they have to go through the RMLO because they can't go to Chase, they can't go to Wells Fargo because their credit's not good. So that's why for home ownership, they will pay that extra 2%, 1% on it. I mean, hopefully rates are going to go down and they can refinance it, but that's why they do it, because they can't get ownership any other way.
And the other one that we see a lot of is maybe like landscapers or house cleaners and stuff like that, where a lot of their business is in cash. And so it's tough to blame them to not want to report all of it, And so if they're obviously not having a W-2, they're not having a great 1099 where maybe it's only showing they made, 25 grand for the year, even though they made 100 grand. A lot of times these people have cash. They have cash in their pocket, but they're like, hey, I can't go get a traditional loan. So this works for me.
Yep. 1099. I agree with that 100%.
So let's hear the horror story of somebody not. Have you had anybody not qualify them and then have to foreclose them out? And is there any?
Yeah, I have any type of. We could sit here and have some drinks and probably talk about horror stories for days. A lot of people call me a little bit too later, like, Rochelle, what can I do? But a lot of people don't realize everything that we just said in regards to that, making sure it's transparent and things of that sort. But the thing that I've seen a lot when I'm talking, since we're talking about creative finance, is your acquisition side is sub 2, then you wrap it right to what we call a homestead buyer. These are the individuals that we're talking about in regards to wanting to pay a higher interest rate, and they default. Okay. There's an underlying lien and an original seller, and it just has this domino effect. And that is a really bad place to be in when you don't do your documentation the way, because if I'm the middle person that bought it from the original seller, I have my protections of a lien on the property, and then the person that I sold it to defaults. It's the foreclosure process. It's ruining the seller's credit. Just didn't do the right thing to get the person qualified. And mind you, we all know people just default sometimes, the things like that happen. But when it comes to that scenario, which I have seen, they don't have the right documentation in place, and the seller's not going down alone. They're taking everybody.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? And
for sure.
So what type of documentation would present value in this scenario? We could have a deed in lieu of foreclosure. We could have a pre-signed quitclaim deed that would protect the seller. We could double that documentation for myself and the seller to be able to not go through that foreclosure process. So just back to what I'm saying, and people might be thinking like, what the heck is she talking about? But what I'm saying is there's protections that you can put in there if something like that happens, because people's lives change, guys.
For sure.
People are buying creative finance, which I think is great for closure and people in distress, So you just, once again, back to our point that we're making, is these horror stories happen, but when you have the right documentation in place, it can alleviate it and make it just a much more simpler process and protect everybody, right? That's one thing that I love about being a realtor. It's like we're taught to take care of our sellers. It's not just we bought the home from them and we're going to sell it. Like, do we have the right documentation in there if something does default? So yeah,
for sure.
I've seen that.
So I got a quick question. Kind of like I'm kind of new to this. I understand it, but I've been doing more and more of them. And currently, what I have is I just have the payments on auto pay, and then I have the servicing company just reimburse me, so that they're getting auto paid.
So then you'll never miss a payment.
Yeah, right. So the seller's never going to have an issue. I leave an extra payment in the account, so that it's auto paid. Yeah. And then my equity piece, I just take a second, and as a second lien holder, if the C seller or C buyer quits making a payment, since I'm the lien holder in the second position, I'm still making the first. I can start the foreclosure on the C property. And just like any lender, if I have to pay out stuff to keep it current, I can always tack it on to my payoff if they want to ever try to redeem.
That's what I was going to ask, Chris. I was going to ask, so how many months do you let go by, or how many missed payments before you will send them into foreclosure and say, okay, now I get my property back and I get your down payment?
Here's a couple other scenarios in this. If I speak out of turn, Rochelle, correct me, but like in Arizona, you can do it as an agreement for sale, which is just basically a contract for sale. And unless it's more than 25% down, you can actually take it back in like 31 days.
Wow.
So, but in Texas, Texas doesn't allow lease options or agreements for sale. So when you sell it, you have to sell it as a wrap as well. So you have the first wrap, and then you have to sell the second wrap. And the only way for me to do that is keep my second in place. And when they miss a payment to me, I can foreclose on my second, even though I'm keeping the the first current.
Mhm.
And if they want to reinstate, I'm just like, hey, it's 3 payments to reinstate plus late fees. I don't have any default interest. Like if I'm a hard money lender, I'd put the default interest at like 30% and then clobber them. But
Right.
And those deeds are really common. And I'm always thinking about the newbies that are watching. So we have the loan in place guys and we have the deed, and that deed gets filed with the county that shows ownership. So what Chris is talking about, the agreement for sale, which can be called a contract for deed or executory contract, what it does is if he is the lien holder and he's created a bank because he's going to be wrapping it to someone, it keeps the deed in his name. So it protects him for what a lot of people like when they talk about the due on sale clause, even though the risk is very, very, very minimal. But he's able to keep that deed into his name, but give the wrap buyer ownership rights so they can, it's their property. And that will actually help him with the foreclosure process also, with those documentations. So I think that's a very popular way that a lot of people do it. And so, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good way, a good strategy to have.
yeah. But like I said, in Texas, you don't have that. So like I said, I've just been putting, for an instance, I got a deal in Texas. It was 225 at 2.75. I gave them 275. So I gave them 50 grand.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a 2020 property. So I relisted it for 310. I got $45,000 down. So I almost got all my money back minus the agents. But I have an equity piece, so I have a second deed of trust for my equity. So if the payment doesn't come in, because in Texas, I have to actually transfer title to them.
Right.
But if their payment is missed, it's also missed on my second. So then my second can start the foreclosure. And Texas is actually pretty lenient as far as the speed. I think if you time it right, you can get it done in like 45 days.
Okay. Now, Chris, are you noticing that when you're wrapping these, in general, would you say that you are able to sell them for higher than what the actual retail value is, or are you going pretty close to retail? Because from what I've heard from other people is that you can typically push the price point because they don't have a ton of options.
So the interesting one in the Texas deal that I did, I'm just going to refer to that one. This house had sat on the market at 305 for like 75 days.
Okay.
No offers. But the fact that I was willing to give the seller financing, it sold in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I gave them options at 8.5, or if they would have given me 20% down, which means I would have had zero cash in the deal, I'd actually offered them 77.5.
And what price was it sitting on the market at?
So it was sitting at 305 for 75 days.
Okay. And what did you sell
I
for?
put it up at 310 and sold it in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So I mean, so you were able to push higher than what they were even getting before.
Yeah, and so the reason why it wasn't selling is it was in a brand new built neighborhood where you could go to the builder and buy a brand new one, pick out your colors and your tile for $320.
Right.
But the seller,
I mean, I kind of get that.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Have you guys ever talked about notes since you guys are wrapping in regards to like note buying or in that world at all? Or
I did a note school on my YouTube channel for fun.
Oh, you did?
If you go to Just for Flips YouTube channel, there's a whole note school. If you get bored, I was just trying to create content. So
Chris is a well-oiled machine. He's got every facet taken care of.
I love that. Yeah, that's the place where I really like when you're getting into the wrap side is just what Chris has said is, obviously with the down payment that he's getting, that's what I love about creative finance though, because you can a lot of times get into these deals without using any money out of your pocket, mind you.
Right.
I mean, there is closing costs and we have realtors. It doesn't work all the time. Unicorn deals are, something that we come by every single day, but that's the beauty of it. And I think that's why it's getting so attractive and attracting such a big crowd, from newbies to people that have been in the business. But if you structure it right, he can use that down payment and it can go to his acquisition, his seller proceeds.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, what name an easier way to start buying rental properties? I mean, that's right. There's so many people, we notice a lot of, on the traditional side that want to get into the investment space. And I mean, again, it's just, like you said, if you can find deals where you can be next to no money out of pocket, and then a lot of times you can be no money out of pocket. So it's I think that's why it's growing in popularity so much as well. It just makes sense.
So just to go back to that Texas deal, my out of pocket is like $25,000 for a quote unquote rental property. And
Yeah.
I don't get it because I'm not getting the depreciation or anything like that. Now, there are some people that teach if you sell it on the agreement for sale, it's still technically in your name and you can still depreciate it because you so but I'm not going to get into that. But I got $25,000 in this deal and I'm making $1,200 a month.
Yeah, give me a break.
Call it $15,000 a year on a $25,000 investment.
Yeah, you'll get all your money back within less than 2 years.
Exactly.
Chris,
That's
I'd like
not
your
bad.
your opinion on this. If I could ask you something, just with your loan officer background, I did a video recently just because part of the creative process, a lot of people, like we talked about, doing foreclosures or helping people in distress. That reinstatement that you talked about. So if they're behind on payments and it's going to foreclosure, what I'm finding people doing is that they will have the seller qualify for a loan modification. And that loan modification, as I read the documentations a few years ago, I said, wait a second, there's a box there that they're checking that says, I will live in this property. And I am seeing, we don't do them at my company anymore because I can see how that can get very, in my opinion, it's not going to look good when you're doing lots of transactions. But I'm seeing a lot of title companies and closing attorneys say, if you're doing a loan modification, we don't want anything to do with it.
Well, no, so when I started this process, I reached out to an attorney and so from what I've gathered is absolutely zero wraps on loan mods. Like, don't touch them. They've signed a piece of paper that, hey, you're in distress. We have agreed to modify your loan because they look at your income and they modify your loan based on your financial status. And then all of a sudden you go and you let somebody wrap that, a couple years later.
Right.
My understanding is that's an absolute no-no. And then I had the same attorney said something about FHA within the first 2 years or something about don't do FHAs in the first 2 years either, because once again, there's something about, and I haven't read the FHA documents, but they're supposed to stay there for a couple years before, so if they did last year and then they're only 1 year into payments, you're not supposed to do those either. Those are the two. He's like, just don't do it.
Interesting. Right.
I think, to be completely honest with you guys, that needs to be talked about more, because what I'm seeing on a national side is people are doing it all day, every day. I actually know of a title company where the attorney general got involved, and obviously we're not trying to fear monger anybody or be but it's just, we're talking about everybody. This is a wealth building principle being in real estate. Like, you have to learn how to do things the right way.
For sure.
And a lot of people are just stuck on getting the deals and doing what they want with the deals, and they're not paying attention to the nuances like FHA or loan modifications. And, it's not a good scenario. So I don't really hear anybody else talking about it. And I would love for people to listen to that, because I just, it's their transaction. They can do what they want. We say no to those because of what Chris just said. But I'm hoping more mentors and gurus out there will start talking about that, because it's done all day, every day.
So here's the problem is, I'm not going to say too many bad things about our industry, but how many wholesalers might get one of these across their desk? They may know or not know, but they're like, who cares? I'm going to wholesale it and get it.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
They're in and out of the transaction and they're going to get their entry fee with their assignment fee.
Right.
And, party C that might be like me that is building a rental portfolio. So just a little history. I started down this path, I want to say 2 months ago. I have had 140 calls with people trying to send me seller finance deals, because I've been I've been buying them, and I've wholesaled a couple. That Texas one obviously is a great one. I actually did buy another California one, which was kind of cool, but then I found out that the lien position was switched on the first and second. And I didn't want to have to go to obviously if you're taking over subject to, I didn't want to have to go to the lender and try to get title switched, because the original owner is not on title anymore, and I'm like, sorry, I can't do this one because I don't
Yeah.
want to go to the lenders and try to get the lien position switched. It was clearly just a mistake by the title company, but I mean, the original homeowner could go fix it. I can't go fix it. So, or I can go fix it, but there's a risk for me to go fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think going off of what you said, the for new wholesalers coming in and doing these and trying to just make, quick wholesales on them, is the barrier to entry with wholesaling is so low. I mean, it's so, you know what I mean? You don't have to have any type of anything, you can just say, I'm a wholesaler, and you can come in and you can start making some calls, you can do whatever. But so it's, that in most scenarios, most cases, the homework has not been done. There's no due diligence on the backside. It's just, let me just try to get in and make a quick buck and see how it goes.
Well, and that's what is the concern of like the wholesaler that takes in this subject too, gets it done.
Yeah.
And, it wasn't fun making I think I made 2 payments for the Texas deal before, it actually closes in like 3 days. And then I don't ever have to make a payment again.
Yeah.
But, for that new wholesaler, making those 2 payments might not be fun. They might not have
absolutely.
So their goal is just they get their C buyer that's going to take them out, and they're just happy to get the buyer, and then they'll qualify them. And I don't remember, like, I need to go back and look at my loan officer penalties, but as a for me, obviously a higher standard because I'm a loan officer, but the penalty for acting as the bank and not qualifying them and putting them into what they would call a predatory situation is pretty steep.
Right.
Something you don't want to get hit with.
And then you have, like we said, we have these young guns coming in, excited about their entry fee.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, and also on the creative side, the sub-2 side, it's like I can get into these deals with no money out of my pocket, but they're not in the, a financial scenario to be able to take that type of hit, so it can be, something that they're not thinking about. But back to kind of my point, we were all at that place at some point in time. Just have people that you can, in your circle, that you can call. Like, I know, Chris, I know your background, having someone like yourself or Luke or someone like that, or, your mentor or whatever it is, just make sure you're collaborating with people to say, this is what I'm doing. What are the things that I should look out for? Because, we've all made those mistakes. Luckily, I've never had to make penalties like that, but we all, you know what I mean? So just if you're new out there, make sure you have good people that you can collaborate with to hear this type of advice, that can help you.
Yeah,
no doubt about that.
So there's a I'm not going to say any names, but there's a local escrow officer in good old Phoenix, Arizona, that lost their job because they were doing wraps on VAs and not doing wraps on VAs properly. So,
wow.
And this person has been in the business for years, and they are no longer in the business because they got let go because of not doing things right. And I actually
right. Was it just negligence, or was it they were trying to get away with stuff?
So I don't know about.
You know what I mean? I'm wondering, like, did they not know, or was it like, okay,
no, they were doing all the paperwork right. I just don't think that. I think they were doing a lot of FHA and VA loans, and I don't think that is necessarily, like, obviously FHA and VA doesn't want this done a lot, right? I mean, I've had an attorney said he's looked at it and he's like, there is zero problem in doing it. Actually, that same attorney is like, hey, I'll close these for you. He's just a local attorney here. He's like, I'll close these for you, but he's not going to give you title insurance. He's just going to look at the abstract title and say, hey, everything's nice and clean. Everything's clear. There's no miscellaneous judgments or anything. And he's just going to take the deed from seller A, move it into my name. Obviously, most title insurance is for the lender anyway, right?
Right.
So if the lender's staying in place and the document order is in the document order, like they're going to be in first position. They were insured in first position there. No one's going to jump in front of them on this transaction. Obviously, this attorney, and maybe you do this the same way, Rochelle. That's how you do it. You just look at abstract title and say, hey, here's the first lien position. There's no other judgments or liens. If there is, here we got to pay these off. Or obviously you probably see a lot of them where there's back payments owed or something like that.
Yeah.
We get the back payments owed. Now we're back to the first lien position. Everything's clear. You just move title, and I'm not trying to get in your business. I was just, this is what I've learned in the process. Yeah. The escrow company, actually Fidelity told me, I sent them a deal and they said they wouldn't do it. And it was because it was an FHA loan. And, and that's just Fidelity Title saying, hey, we're not gonna do a wrap on an FHA loan.
Right.
So. What I've seen too is I personally have done those. I mean, for my own portfolio and things of that sort. But what I've learned is that one, you have to find an investor friendly title company, right? That has a good type of underwriters and things of that sort. But they don't want the board of directors or the attorneys that are behind all these escrow officers. They don't want you to do something wrong on the FHA and the VA side, because one, there's so many different nuances, like Chris is talking about, wrapping, armalos, things of that sort, that don't get done, when the investors bring in the transaction. And two, they don't want to be blacklisted, right? Yeah. So if they lose the availability to be able to do VA and FHA loans, that's huge for like a escrow company attorney. So once they make a mistake, that one escrow officer, and I actually know exactly who you're talking about because they came to me to do that transaction, to finish that transaction, but then it affects the business of the whole, company. And so they can be done, is my opinion, but they have to be done the right way. You need somebody that's done it before and that knows the right documentation. I would not go sign a deed with a seller on a FHA and VA loan and do it on your own. But then you also got to pay attention to the laws of the state too, of like how you're doing things of that sort, and know the difference between what Chris said, the FHA and the 2 years. I mean, that's true. A lot of people don't pay attention to that. So do a lot more due diligence on those things. But yeah, there are some people that absolutely just won't look at it. And there's some people that will do it all day long.
Yeah. Well, and speaking on the importance of using title companies that are, friendly with it. Cause I mean, we've seen it happen far too many times where you have a deal completely blown up because someone said the wrong thing or someone did the wrong thing. And it sucks because obviously something like that happens. And let's just say that the deal was perfectly fine before, everything was legal, everything was on the table, but then title just mishandled it or said the wrong thing to the wrong person. Then just like that, you lost a great deal. It's just, it's not worth it. So that's why you have to make sure that you are dealing with a title company that knows what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
Just a small last tidbit, if anybody's listening or watching, people in foreclosure, there are states that have foreclosure laws protecting people in foreclosure. Once you reinstate them, like i.e. Phoenix, Arizona, you go and reinstate somebody and take a quick claim and do a lease option back to them. That's a no-no. that is basically against the law in the state of Arizona. So just because they can't pay, and you get the deed, you take the deed from them, and then you lease option it when they're having financial troubles on paying. Well, if you knew the right person to Google that did a bunch of those, you would see that he's serving 7 years in jail.
Yeah.
So really quick, Crystal, you said, hold on. So you said don't do, what was that now? No.
Yeah, no, they should be. Okay, so I want to ask you guys this question. I am so literally grateful that we're having this conversation, because when I tell people these things, people always look at me like, you don't want me to do these deals. Yeah. And I know it's because of like Chris's background and obviously loan officer. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we bridge that gap with my colleagues as realtors? And then, I mean, we can only do so much, but I'm always thinking about like the knowledge base of this. I can't even say like how important these things are, because that gets done all day long too. Yeah. And it's just
it's state by state. It's state by state. Like some states are more lenient than others, but like, people that could be watching from, other places, I mean, you should definitely check your predatory foreclosure lending laws, because, there was a company literally that was in business, and they would knock on everybody's door, pay the reinstatement, you know, I mean, sometimes reinstatements are only like 15,000. Control the house, resell it back to them. They thought they had a great model. Reinstate them for like 15 grand, resell them the house for $75,000 more. They got like a great return on investment.
Yeah.
You know, you do that enough times, and you know, it work out. But yeah,
right.
Currently spending 7 years in jail, and the only reason I know about it is I knew the guy. He would show up at events and stuff like that, and just another small tidbit: don't ever pay cash for a house.
Right.
When I met you, don't ever take dollar bills to pay for a house.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll take another note there. Hold on.
Yeah, here, write that down. So tell me what you guys are experiencing on the Novation side. Luke, you said that earlier, like, in regards to like your transaction. I just love to hear kind of like what you guys are experiencing on that side in regards to Novations.
Yeah, so obviously the more that we've done now, it's become you really realize what is important on what needs to be said, to the sellers up front. Some small changes that we've made too. I mean, one thing that we stopped doing is that we were kind of, when we were pushing them before, we were saying that we were, and again, you got to, the thing that's tough about Novations is that you have to be able to explain to them what it is, right? And then you have to be able to kind of draw them in on the sense that, listen, I know that a cash option might not be the best for you. And also it doesn't sound like you want to list it. So we have another option, and it's kind of in the middle of the two, kind of like a hybrid almost.
Mm-hmm.
But what we were realizing is that, we were undercutting the market when we were putting them back on. Because you got to try to get them to move quickly, right?
Right.
That's part of the sale. That's part of the sizzle that gets them is, hey, I'm going to try to get this thing moved for you quick. But we were realizing though that a lot of times, if we would even say 30 to 45 days, that's still really difficult because you're putting it on the market, and so to get a transaction closed in that time frame is tough.
Right.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, obviously I wasn't part of your conversations. I would say you should at least expect 90, right?
Yes.
So we're pushing like 60, because again, we are like, when we're getting them, the only way we're doing them for ourselves is truly if we're going to really undercut the market quite a bit and be able to move it quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, we lost out on one because we had told them, this is the very first one we had done, but we told them it would be like probably 45 days. And that was what was written in the contract. So 45 days came, and we had interested parties. We had a couple of people who wanted to put offers in, but we're like, there's no way we can close this thing in the next 10 days or whatever it was. And so we started putting kind of 60 days on there and just let them know that they need to kind of they need to help us and work with us as much as they possibly can, in the sense, because what we ended up telling this guy was they didn't get out of the property and they didn't give us access to it for like almost 2 weeks. And so we're like, listen, like if we're not going to even be able to get access and photos taken for 2 weeks to be able to stage it and everything, you're not leaving us a lot to work with here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what we ended up doing now is, like I said, push that back, and then also just tell them, hey, this starts immediately and we need to jump on this ASAP. So that's been a big difference for us since we
Are you finding some that are retail ready and just putting them on the market, or so not doing the rehab? I know people are doing Novations, so many different. Okay, so no rehab. So
some have been, need some work. But I mean, no, I mean, honestly, I feel like the biggest factor that we're seeing kind of with people that are interested in Novations is it's a really clean house, but they want to get out of there quickly, but they don't want to drop down to that cash price, because obviously, as we all know, a lot of times the cash price is going to be like 2/3. It's going to be 65, 70% of the value. Sometimes you can get to like 75.
You give them like 40.
Get out of here. Hey, this isn't 2017, Chris. All right.
Yeah.
What we're kind of seeing though is that's kind of been the buyer or the seller that's interested. Maybe they don't want to put it on the market, and they're not going to go down to that cash offer, but it is a really clean house. So a perfect example would be, let's just say, all the houses that are similar to theirs are selling for 400, right? So if they're all selling for 400 and theirs is probably a 400 house as well, it's extremely clean, very similar to these ones. We're going to go ahead and try to get it for, say, 320, 330. But that cash offer would need to be 280, right? And so then, we explained to them that we're still paying all the fees, we're still taking on everything, but it's going to be basically a net offer to them of that, let's say 320, right? 340, whatever. So we're going to go ahead and undercut. So if they're all going for 4 and we think that they're moving quickly at 4, well, then we'll list it at 379. And try to push and try to get that, that activity immediately. So, I mean, the last one that we did, Cal, we had 27 showings the first 2 days that we listed it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So kind of creating that, that need and want for the property has been big. So, but again, like I said, otherwise we're not really trying to take properties on if we're going to say, hey, basically we might as well just offer you a listing. We're open to it, but it's like we want to go for ones that we think are like a sure novation.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I know some people are doing some with the rehab, and that gets,
right.
I'm sure someone that's watching this is probably thinking that it's been getting a little crazy because there's not a lot of people that are protecting their money. You know what I mean? So they come in and they put that rehab budget. Let's say it's a lipstick repair. Let's say it's, 40, 50,000. And that's one of the recommendations. Like, have you filed anything on there? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or memorandum. Well, and yeah. And I'm telling them like your money's at risk. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because, however it's written up in the contract, there's a good chance that if you don't get that thing sold, that they just get that back and they're getting their house with those nice renovations that you've made now. It's like, what? I actually thought about it. I don't think I need to sell anymore.
You know what's crazy, Luke, is I've actually had sellers say, I want to stay in the property.
After renovations?
Yes, after renovations.
Oh, yeah.
And thank God we had made that recommendation. They had like the memorandum and all these other different things that we had on there. But I was like, it does happen. I know it sounds crazy, but
it sounds crazy, but at the same time, when we're in this industry and do what we do, we see it daily in the sense that we see, houses go from this to this. Before and afters are obviously a very popular thing on everything that we do, rehabs, because obviously it's a huge difference. And so the amount of times that a seller might see their house after and be like, holy shit, I had no idea my house could look like that. So then they're like, I really like this now. You can see it. I'm just saying we haven't had it happen yet, but you could easily see a seller being like, actually, I kind of like the house.
Yeah, I know. I think I'm going to stay.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So that's funny.
Yeah.
Well, Rochelle, where do we send, should we just post your email on here? Or what's
you can put my email on there. I mean, the best way to get a hold of me is probably actually my website at constantclose.com, just because it's organized. They can book a free call with me or my team. And just we help as far as even structuring deals, getting in there and being like, these are my numbers. How do I structure it? They can also ask about our services. And then I just have people call me saying, hey, Rochelle, I need a title partner. So it's the best way to do it. So you can pick a time that works for you and it's organized. My email gets inundated and I would hate to miss somebody that's reaching out. So probably the website would be best. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for jumping on. We appreciate it. Just want to make sure that people are doing as they get taught and all the gurus are telling them how to do it, make sure they're doing it the right way. So
doing the right way. No, I appreciate you having me. So nice to meet you, Luke, and good to see you.
I know. Nice to meet you as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll have to do this again sometime.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thanks for jumping on.
Okay. Talk to you.
We'll see you guys.
See ya.